Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So good evening to everyone in Zoom land. I hope you're well. We're all doing well here, I think. Some questions, maybe I'll use these as a way of giving some Dhamma reflections. Quite helpful. Questions are always helpful for a teacher, so keep them coming. And first of all, where's this one? No. Yes, let's try that one first. You spoke a little on the sound of silence, where you mentioned the space in between thoughts. One can hear the sound of silence between thoughts, a bit like a high-pitched ringing tone. Can you speak more about this inner sound? Is this similar to what some call nada? How can one use this sound of silence in relation to both concentration and insight meditation? So many of you have read Ajahn Sumedho's work, and you know he talks a lot about the sound of silence. But just before I talk about that, in relation both to concentration and insight meditation, samatha vipassana, I've never learned my Buddhism that way. I only discovered that when I was in my 5th year as a monk. I had no idea that existed. And it doesn't really exist that much in the suttas. It's a kind of modern dichotomy. And those words exist in suttas, but it comes more from this Visuddhimagga. And it's very much I think the Burmese used those ideas a lot. Ajahn Chah never used that formula, and I've never seen them as being separate. I don't see, first of all, I don't define samatha as concentration. I don't define jhana as absorption. I define jhana as meditation, and I define meditation as composure. So there's a whole history of why these ideas are the way they are, and I don't think it'll be too academic to get into that. But for me, and the way Luangpor Cha and Luangpor Sumedho have taught me, they're not really different. They're, you need composure and presence to understand and have insight, and the insight then helps you to be more composed and present. They're not separate, but where that separation came from was the definitions of jhana, which are to some extent controversial. I better not go there. Anyway, it would take all night. Anyway, she's on the ball, so I won't go there. But I can speak on the sound of silence. I think the significance of, so this would be called nada yoga, and you find it in I think you'll find it even in the Sufi tradition. You certainly find it in the yoga traditions. I think you find it in Sikhism. When you have a certain attitude of awareness, when your awareness is relaxed and receptive, when awareness is not out on a particular object, when awareness is not contracted, when awareness isn't engaged in trying to get something. So when it is receptive, when it is relaxed, when there is receptive, relaxed listening, but not listening to anything particular. Okay? You get all those ideas? So relaxed. So first of all, listening is quite a good way to think about awareness. The faculty of listening is like looking, for me, is very much about trying to figure out the object. Listening can be that way too, you know, what's going on. But listening for me is a much more receptive base to think about awareness. So listening to this moment, say, you could say, and not just about the sound of this moment, but how this whole moment feels to you. I could use the word listening to this moment, right? It would be both the physical feeling and the smell and the emotional tone of the whole thing. I could listen to it, if you get the way I'm using the word listening. So listening in a relaxed and receptive way brings you to that sound. And that sound is a kind of high-pitched sound. What it is, I don't know. Some people say it's the sound of your nervous system. Some people say it's the sound of God. Who cares? Whatever definition you give to it, I think it's an indication, at least for my practice, that the attitude of attention is now correct. It's appropriate. It's right. So it's a kind of combination of samma samadhi and samma virya. The attention, the effort, the composure is correct. So if I hear it, I mean, I can hear that, but anyone who starts to hear that, that's not any kind of attainment. I would say it's just an indication that this is a good direction. Because some people then get greedy. Oh, I want the sound of silence, right? And that kind of ruins it because you're no longer receptive. So you hear about this. Oh, where is that? Have you got the sound of silence yet? No. And then it becomes this whole drama of attainment. And then, oh, you got it. He got it. I didn't get it. We can be really funny about that. But so it's not important, but it is indicative. And it's not, I don't think you find it in the suttas. I've never come, not that I'm that well read, but it is present in some forms of yoga and other things. So if you do hear that, then just contemplate what attitude you have, what the quality of attention is in order for you to hear that. And that quality of relaxed listening presence is where you start to hear that. But maybe not everyone hears it. I don't know. I don't know if it's a universal phenomenon or not. But in itself, it's just indicative. It's a kind of symptomatic of a good practice. So if we dismiss the sound of silence, but we look at that, contemplate like, well, what would relaxed attention be like, as opposed to trying to see something. If you say, all of us have suffered from having had a really good meditation and then tried to get it back for the next 2 years, right? You know, finally, after all these years, my mind is peaceful. Oh, I've got it. And then you're a wreck the next sitting because you're trying to get it back and you can't get it back and you suffer. And that kind of attention, seeking something, is not relaxed attention. And it's something we learn in meditation, where any experience, you have to keep letting it go. You know, ploi wang, keep letting it go. And it's very hard if you do have a really profound experience and then it goes away. It's really hard, almost impossible not to get greedy about it, right? Because it was so good and you think you had something. Well, you did, but it wasn't permanent. And then you know then you struggle. You know, you struggle trying to recreate that mindset. You do everything right, but you can't get it because there's still greed in the mind. It wants something, and the realization of silence is not a thing. It's just itself. It's not out there. It's the mind knowing the mind. And I think I don't know anyone who does not go through that challenge of letting go of trying to get something. And through that kind of suffering, then you contemplate, like, what is relaxed attention? What would that be? And what would receptive attention feel like? And relaxed, receptive listening, what would that be like? And you start to note that in your body, in your facial muscles, in your shoulders. Your whole body says, yeah, this feels right. It's kind of sinking into the present moment. So if you do hear that sound, good on you. Right? And then see if you can use that. Luangpor Viradhammo used it. I mean, he probably still uses it as a kind of, it's not so much using it, it's like there all the time. And it's just like, oh yeah, yeah. And it's a kind of sign of good practice. So I think most of you know Luangpor Viradhammo's experience of this was, I think he had it as a samanera, but then in Hampstead, in London, when we were living in London, he probably read about this, but he was walking on a very, very busy street, the Haverstock Hill, I think, and bang, that sound came to him very, very strong. And then he started to use that as his reference for presence, as his reference for a correct kind of attention. And then he would use it in complex situations, at committee meetings. He never liked committee meetings. Or when there was a lot of construction noise, and it's always there. And then I think he only started teaching it maybe 5 or 10 years after he'd used it. This is how it works. And then you'll find he's got quite a few talks on that. But for me, it's the attitude. And the attitude of attention is that's so important. And the quality of attention that you put to the moment is so very, very important. All right. And then this one, can I listen to Dhamma talks while meditating and make conscious the teacher's voice? Or is it better training to meditate without external stimuli? Well, if you're listening to a Dhamma talk, then hopefully you're processing information, right? If you're just listening to a Dhamma talk, like I'm listening to the digger, then why listen? This is noise. So you are using your intellect, or you're using something to take in the concepts, to let them come into you, and then to process them, which is fine. But that's different. That's different than abiding as witness to the way things are. Because if I think about like the suggestion I made the last meditation of doing, say, something like anicca sanya, the perception of change. I mean, you don't want to be engaging with concepts. Then you want to test yourself. Well, what's he talking about there? So there comes a point we have to put down the teaching and do it. It's a kind of pragmatism. So the teaching is the theory, and it can be, it can be kind of inspiring, but sometimes people really do listen too much to teachings. I know we have a gentleman near the monastery. I mean, he seems to do every Zoom thing in the universe. I don't know where he gets the time or how he can process all that information. I'm astounded, right? Good on you, I suppose. But for me, I don't know, like if I get a really good Dhamma talk, I mean, that's good for 6 months, right? Because you're really, really working with it. So there's I like the idea of the intelligence of things. Do you know what the intelligence of things is? Like we have chainsaws. We have 3 chainsaws, and we cut our own wood, and so we use chainsaws quite a lot. And a chainsaw is usually quite temperamental. It's a 2-stroke engine, and it's very, very temperamental. And they're quite hard to keep going and fix. So the person who knows how to fix a chainsaw has the intelligence of things. Now, the intelligence of things is like, he's got to figure out how this chainsaw works, why it's not working, what he needs to do to rectify it, and then he has to get it to work. Now, he can't bluff that. He can't like fantasize and just think his way into a solution. He has to have the intelligence of this thing called a chainsaw, right? So it's a pragmatic intelligence rather than an abstract intelligence. He can read, he can look at the YouTube, he can read books about it. That's theory. But when he gets that thing going and it can cut wood, then you know, okay, this guy's intelligent. And so I call that the intelligence of things, okay? If you ask me to cook a meal tomorrow, I would say you're crazy because I don't have the intelligence of food. I mean, I could probably figure out how to boil a potato or something, but I haven't learned that. I haven't. So there's the intelligence of it's the pragmatism of understanding our minds that is different than the theory of understanding our minds, right? And so you can hear a lot of Dharma, but are you implementing it? Are you kind of really bringing it into your own conscious experience so that you're free from suffering? And that's the sign that you have the intelligence of Dharma practice in your life. You don't suffer. So someone who, say, has a lot of knowledge and a lot of ditthi around Buddhism may still suffer, right? And you realize, well, yeah, okay, you kind of know the lists, but why do you suffer? I mean, how long have you been doing this and you're still suffering? So that's a kind of practical intelligence. So if I suggest to you, like in that meditation, anicca sanya, it's a kind of way of observing life, right? Then you have to do that. Now you might think, well, I'm not interested in that. I'd rather do something else. That's fine. But then you have to actually do that. And the doing of that requires a kind of pragmatism. It's a practical application of the teaching. And then in the doing of it, you start to get insight. And that insight means this is the correct use of intelligence. Now, sometimes we think insight is just I call it the great shebang, where you just meditate, and then boing, you're enlightened. And how many people have you met where that happens, right? One, none. And that's a kind of fallacy of becoming, that I just make a lot of effort and then for some reason I get enlightened. This is not that way. You know, this is an intelligence where you're using this teaching. So to this question, I would say there is a difference. And I would say, why would you want to listen to so much Dharma? Like anicca dukkha anatta, that's probably enough for one lifetime. So why we listen to a lot of Dharma is that we get reminded of the same things again. So there's value in that. But there's also value in just kind of figuring it out for yourself and struggling. Okay. Would you please clarify the difference between negating a thought and the phrase, don't go there, while we are doing walking meditation? Well, I don't know about you, but one of my great say hindrances in meditation was trying to get rid of thought. So when I noticed thought was that say I was kind of lost in thought, then I would focus on my object of meditation in order to suppress, in order not to think, basically. And that very attempt to get rid of thought through absorbing onto an object didn't work, because it was not based on awareness, it was based on aversion to thinking. So then I really hold my mind on something, and then I find myself thinking even more, getting overwhelmed by it. So that can't be right. And then I saw, oh, that's what you're doing. When you notice thought, then you're trying you're focusing on the object, not to think. So actually, the problem is aversion to thinking, and that was the tanha. So then I started to say, I started to inquire into things like, well, the reason I was trying to get rid of thought was because, okay, this is difficult, but I thought I was a thinker. I assumed that I was the guy producing these thoughts. Well, if I'm the guy producing these thoughts, then I can be the guy that's not going to think, darn it. I'm not going to think, blah, 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 blah. And that is a fallacy. That's not true, because if you are the thinker, then don't think. Right? Okay, no one's going to think anymore. And it doesn't work that way, because blah, you just start thinking. So thought is a phenomenon that arises because of causes and conditions. Now, one of the things that I found very, very important in my meditation was to in that moment, when I noticed that there was thinking, to bring a lot of attention to that moment, because in that moment, the sense of self would arise. The sense of me, oh no, there I go, I'm thinking again. The sense of self, me, and then I have to try harder in order not to think. So I started to use a kind of, this was many years ago, but now I've been teaching it a bit. I would use, I think I did this a lot this last year. I like to use koans and weird questions. So I put this question to myself: is presence ever absent? Maybe you've heard some of my talks around that. Is presence ever absent? And it's a kind of interesting question, because the assumption was that I lost it, and then I got lost in thinking. But is presence ever absent? Have I ever not been here? I know it's a weird question, but ask yourself that. Have you ever, wherever here is, I mean, I'm not talking about Niranara, but have you ever not been here? Or has presence ever not been here? And if you ask that question, then your mind becomes quite bright or very present. Now, you might think that I wasn't here, but if you really look at that, you'll say that presence was always there through the whole thinking process. And that's what resolved. I know that's maybe a bit woo-woo, difficult to understand, but that's what resolved for me the sense that I am the thinker. I began to see that no, thought arises conditioned by memory, conditioned by phenomena. And when I saw that, then it was okay, thought comes and goes. And then I could choose, as the thinking process started to arise, I could say, don't go there. So let's say, for instance, if I had a disagreement with a monk about something, and in the afternoon, maybe some conflict, and then in the evening I sit in meditation, what's going to arise? Thoughts about that conflict. Well, that's natural, isn't it? It's not thoughts about Mars or your conflicts. It's thoughts about the conflict. So that seems natural. With this as condition, that arises, so that thought arises. But then the question is the question of attachment. And my attachment if I'm heedless, then I just start thinking these conflicting thoughts. He shouldn't have said that, and I shouldn't have said that, that's for sure. And he shouldn't have said that, yeah, but yeah, no. So then that's indulgence. But then the other also is a problem. Oh no, there's that, oh, stop thinking, will you stop thinking? And that doesn't work either. So one is indulgence and one is repression. But the middle way for me was, is presence ever absent? And that's taking me back to the witnessing of thought as an object rather than being the thinker. So it sounds like a complicated piece of analysis, I know, but I think that's a very important place in your practice to really, really look. When you notice thinking, is there a judgment that I shouldn't be thinking? And does that then create a kind of effort to get rid of thinking? I found this in walking meditation, and this was many, many years ago, but I would just try to control my mind to not think. And that seemed like a good idea. And then I would would say, okay, 20 paces, no thought, no thought. 5 paces, blah, blah. I'd be lost in thought. And then when I noticed that I'd, hit the wall, as it were, at the end, oh gosh, come on, try harder, Viradhammo. Turn around really, really mindfully, but real slow, no thinking. Come on. 20, and I'm thinking, I was all trying to control, but it wasn't really aware. It wasn't aware. And that's the way you learn. And then I began to relax more and just understand that thought was natural. And then the difference between repression of thought and indulgence in thought. And that is I would say that's a huge thing in meditation. It's not a small thing, because thought is such a compelling form. So then you have like thoughts like doubting thoughts are very compelling. Self-doubt. Am I really adequate? Am I up to the mark? Am I as good as this person? Am I doing okay? Is it going to be all right? They are so real. They are like ghosts in the mind. And to say that that's just a thought that has arisen is super skillful. So the more we do that, that's thought. That's a memory. Thought feels this way, memory that way. Then we can shift to another sense base. We can listen to sound. We can listen to the sound of silence. But that shifting is not a denial of thought. It's just knowing, no, I don't have to be in the sense base of thought. I can be in the sense base of listening. And that's when you start to use things like the sound of silence as a way of not going to thought. But it's not from trying to get rid of. It's from clarity, from wisdom, from understanding. So if I have if my mind is compulsively doubting all the time, right? And I know it's a really strong habit, then I can make an adhitthana. When I notice doubt arise, I'll just label it doubt. And then I'll use the sound of silence. Or I'll just label it doubt, and then I'll feel my heart chakra. Or I'll label it as doubt, and I'll just feel my feet touching the ground. And that's what bhavana is about. It's training in your own karmic formation, how to not go down the avenues of suffering and habit. And because those habits are so profoundly ingrained in our minds, they're really deep. It takes a lot of work. You have to be very patient, because even though I understand things, the vipaka gamma of the conditioned mind can be so very, very powerful. So you need to be very kind to yourself, but determined. It's kind of, no, I'm going to figure this out. So I hope that answers that. Was that the other side? Would you please elaborate on the two notions of self-doubt and self-consciousness? Well, the way I use self-consciousness is like, I don't know how this person, and I don't know how that translates in Thai, but let's say, because I tended to be very shy, I was a very shy person, and kind of like if I went to an airport, I felt horribly self-conscious because I thought everyone was looking at me, and they were. If you want to feel self-conscious, put on a brown bed sheet and walk through Chicago airport. That is the most painful thing for someone who's shy. Someone who's not shy, but for a shy person, it's agony. It's because you can't hide. I remember being in Chicago airport and there was a newspaper there, and I took the newspaper. So that's self-consciousness. And it's very painful. It's very, very painful. Who did I just read about? I think some famous model, I think, had a face surgery and it went totally wrong. And now she has a kind of, I guess, a really maybe ordinary face. And she's just totally self-conscious, embarrassed by it. So it's a strong reference to what I look like, what I feel like in public. That's how I use the word self-consciousness. And it's a kind of function of shyness. I don't know how this person uses it. And so the way I got over that was to walk in airports. So then I'd go to the airport and I'd go to the busiest place in the airport because I wanted to be somewhere in the back toilets, right? Where no one could see me. So then I would just walk through and feel self-conscious. Self-consciousness feels this way. I'd be in like the long queues for immigration, and I'd look around. Oh, they're all looking at me. Oh God! And I'd say, self-consciousness feels this way. So I just keep making conscious self-consciousness, and it worked. It worked. But that was my particular character, right? I know other monks. What do you know? They're just great. Oh, wow. I said, I wish I could. Now I don't have a problem. Now I'm an anthropologist. Now I just look at other people. But it was, but you could see how, because I was willing to kind of really go into the feeling of self-consciousness. I mean, I had no choice. It's the only outfit I have. And my poor mother, my mother was a very elegant woman. She dressed really, really elegantly, and she gets this. And she used to say, she saw pictures of Zen monks. They have these elegant black frocks. She said, why can't you dress like that? Anyway, self-doubt. Self-doubt for me is kind of more like in the thinking realm. That like self-consciousness for me was more like in the emotional realm. Self-doubt was, do I really know anything? Do I know what I'm talking about? Or it might be self-disparagement. I'm no good at this, or that guy's much better than me. I'm never going to do this well. Oh, I didn't give that talk very well. Oh gosh, I don't know. It's that kind of me thinking lost in doubt. And that's also very painful. They're very, very painful. And people could say to me, you're great, Viradhammo. Yeah, but you don't really know. You don't really know me. You're a really nice guy. No, you don't really know me. It didn't matter what people said. My delusion was stronger than that. And then notice that. Okay, self-doubt feels that way. Blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, that's self-doubt. So all the time, the vipaka kamma is coming up because it has to. It's the way the conditioned mind is that way. And it comes up, and I recognize that this is a sankhara. This is an object in awareness. And if I keep doing that, I no longer create the causes for future self-doubt. I no longer create the causes for future self-consciousness. And so it finally dies away. And that's the theory of the end of kamma, or the end of vipaka kamma, right? And I'm not talking about past lives. I could speculate, yeah, in a past life I was this or that, but it need be that. In this present life, we have all kinds of conditioning. And for some reason, I think some of my fearful conditioning came from my refugee background. I was born in 1947. My mother gave birth to my brother 6 months before the end of the war. We were in a refugee town. They were broke. They didn't know where they're going. All that stuff the refugees have. And then in Canada, we were people would kind of. And the school I had a lot of refugees, but like my brother had a later. Do you know what lederhosen is? It's a kind of German. Because I was born in Germany. My parents were from Latvia, but the kids would say, "Oh, you kraut," like we had started the war or something. But I mean, we were refugees. It wasn't our fault. So I can imagine, all kinds of little things like that added up to a guy that's kind of shy and frightened or whatever, or maybe not. But it didn't really matter that. What mattered was, well, this is the vipaka kamma I have to learn from. And what am I learning? I'm learning that this is an object in awareness. This arises because of causal conditions. And what is non-grasping? That's the question. What does non-grasping mean? What is upadana? And upadana is the believing in this as a self. And then just seeing out this is self-consciousness, feels this way, my heart's shaking, my guts are shaking, or self-doubt, these are thoughts, these are objects in awareness. Keep doing that, then that's awareness. And then the karma can wear out. Yeah. So, I mean, for this person, I don't know how you use that language, but that's how I use it. Here's a good one. Is it possible to be happy every day? Don't worry, be happy. It's actually an interesting question, because if you read Luangpor Liam's account, for this person, this came from the internet, I would suggest you go to our one of our monasteries, Abhayagiri Monastery website, go to teachings, go to publications, go to teachers. In teachers, go to Luangpor Ajahn Liam, L-I-E-M or A-M? A-M, E-M is it? In something like that, Ajahn Liam, and then look for the book No Worries. And in that book, go to this section where there is his biography. And in his biography, which he talks about his own enlightenment, 1969, and his mind has not shifted from that realization since then. And it sounds happy, right? Trouble with the word happy, right, is that maybe what Luangpor Liam is talking about happy is not what this person means by happy. So it's certain happy, if happy means pleasant, no. Because life is dualistic. So the possibility of everything being pleasant on the sense, in sense consciousness, that's impossible. Because you have physical pain and that's unpleasant. So another way to look at this, is it possible not to suffer every day? And that's a kind of more approachable, maybe, way of thinking about it. And that's true. It is possible not to suffer every day. So if you approach Buddhism from suffering, its cause and the end of suffering, then you can get to a state of mind where there is no suffering. If you approach Buddhism, can I be happy? You're going to have a problem because of the definition of happiness and wanting something called happiness. Now, the thing about suffering, we all suffer, whether it's minor things or major things. So it's always something you can look at. It's also always something you can contemplate, and you can see the causes and you can see the end of suffering. So I would formulate that in a different way. But to this person, do read that account, because it is a stunning, most stunning piece of literature around the possibilities of human enlightenment. And the next question, Lobha, one of the three poisons or fires, and Tanha, the cause of suffering, are these two the same, or is there a difference between them? Well, we have Lobha, Dosa, Moha, Chaimai. So Lobha generally is greed of some sort, whereas Tanha is a broader word. Tanha is Bhava, Vibhava, and Kama Tanha. And Bhava Tanha is the desire to become. Vibhava Tanha is the desire to get rid of. And then Kama Tanha is the absorption into sense pleasure, the desire for sense pleasure. So greed, you could see, would be in there somewhere in terms of bhava, tanha, or whatever. But the thing we really work with are the three tanhas in the Four Noble Truths. So practically speaking, in meditation, you're trying to get to the state of desirelessness, non-desire. I'm trying to use that language. And if you use that language, then you'll see how you're trying to achieve something, how you're trying to make the mind peaceful by getting rid of something. And you begin, like for me, with the fears and social anxieties I faced the problem was not the fear, like the problem of self-consciousness was not the self-consciousness. The problem was not wanting the self-consciousness. And so the cause of suffering is the attachment to tanha. It's not like, I think in that question, where did it go? I lost it. That question was, Lobha, one of the three passions or fires in tanha, the cause of suffering. Tanha is not the cause of suffering, it's the attachment to tanha. And that might not sound like a big deal, but it is a big deal because tanha is natural. But you have to understand it. So I feel fear naturally. I don't want that fear. Because it's unpleasant. I don't want the unpleasant. But then if I just react to that, I don't understand the tanha. I run away from it. So I say, oh, there is fear and there's the desire not to have the fear. That's what I had to look at. The fear was natural. It was neurotic, certainly neurotic, but neurosis is natural too. But the problem was the not wanting of the fear. And once I understood that, then I could be with fear. And then the vipaka kamma of the fear had a chance to lessen. So those three are very important to this person. Do look up the Four Noble Truths and find a good text around it and study the three tanhas. See what they are talking about. Bhava, vibhava, and kama tanha. Very important in the kind of intellectual understanding. Okay. How does Ajahn Chah's teaching of speak little, eat little, sleep little affect or enhance one's practice? It's hard to eat little here, isn't it? Luangpor Chah used to say, you didn't come here for the diet, did you? You know, like he's going to present you a menu. Here you go. Well, what he was like, speak little is, I think, for the gregarious, like in a monastery, the people who are solitary and silent have an advantage. The people who are gregarious and talkative have a disadvantage because what's encouraged is, silent meditation. But that doesn't mean that someone who doesn't speak much isn't neurotic. Someone who doesn't speak much could be just afraid of speaking or just really not socially adept at speaking and might be afraid of social interaction. So it's not an absolute. And this is quite often the problem. You can get a monk or a meditator who looks very ascetic. They don't eat much, they don't speak much, but their mind is garbage. You don't know. You don't know what's going on inside. And certainly I found that as a young monk, I'd say, wow, that guy didn't move. There was one fellow. He didn't move. But he's not moving. He was disassociating. He had nervous. He was psychotic. But I mean, we start to see that pretty quickly. But if you were looking at the outside, oh, gay monk, he hasn't moved for hours. And that's what Ajahn Chah would say, well, the water buffalo hasn't moved for hours either. So speak little, eat little, sleep little. What you want to do is really, I think, speak little is stop talking up here. Isn't it? Like the blah, blah, blah in the mind. How could I speak little in that way? And then how could I communicate with you in a way which is intelligent and compassionate, and yet also how could I be silent with you when it's appropriate? So I would broaden that, right? But isn't it the most difficult thing is to notice the silence, no thought in the mind, and not be engaged in thinking. Eat little, well, I guess, at Wat Pah Pong, it was like you had one chance. And the menu was not that great. So there wasn't much choice. if you ate a lot of kaunio, you almost died. Some of the samaneras, they have this massive thing of kaunio. I said, how do you do it? How does your stomach process this? So eat little. I guess it was because if you ate a lot, then you just end all afternoon, you'd be sleeping. And then sleep little was, I think that was probably the most significant one, is that you just, people would just lay around all the time in the heat and just sleeping a lot, not meditating. And you could see that's not going to be very good for you. But having said that, one thing I would disagree with the kind of system we had was all-night sittings. And I just don't think they were very healthy myself. I did them, but I did have a seizure once from not sleeping. So I pushed the sleep envelope to the maximum, and I had a grand mal seizure. Not pretty. Almost bit my tongue off. So I think I overdid asceticism, and I think probably. I think the Thai monks were strong, but they had a more moderate temperament. And I think and many Westerners, we were really driven and too maybe goal oriented. So if Luangpor Cha said, sleep little, I would be crazy and sleep nothing until I had this grand mal seizure. I put my head through a window. I collapsed on the floor. And Luangpor Cha was there. And this was just after the Anumotana, the meal. So I'm sitting there, my head jerks back. I don't remember anything. There's these louvered windows. I went through, cut my head open. I fell to the floor. Ajahn Pabago jumps down, puts something in my teeth so I don't bite my tongue off. And then I kind of come out after about 2 hours. I sort of, what's going on? And so they took me to the Anamai, the clinic in I'm not sure. There was no hospital, and there was only a veterinarian clinic. So they have one of these needles for horses or dogs, and they're holding me down and stitching up my head, right? And Ajahn Pabago gets ill and he leaves. And so I don't come out of this, And there's Luangpor Cha. He's at the layperson. There was a layperson. What's his name? Sengchai, I think. Interesting how you can remember that. And he had a Esso gas station. And Luangpor Cha is sitting there drinking a Pepsi. It was always Pepsi. And I kind of walk up to him and he says, take it easy, will you? So I did my youthful foolishness on asceticism. So when I see these things, I chuckle. I chuckle in that way. But you could see how in lay life, if your life is just sleeping and eating, it's not going to be very, very skillful. But what is Majjhima practice for you, right? How much sleep do you need? I had to figure that out for myself. And I found it very difficult because the ethic of Wapopong was, you stay up every 1 pra. But I just had this seizure. So it was a real conflict for me because I wanted to lay down. We're not supposed to lay down, but it was quite a conflict. So I'm not much on those ascetic practices. When monks want to do these as a practice, I say, why? Why do you want to do that? You justify that. If you want to fast, why? Because sometimes it's just a matter of kind of male ego, male macho-ness. So having said that, how much sleep do you need? What's appropriate to your body? Because sleep is important. It is very important that way. It's very healing. How much food do you need? Is there a place for silence and not speaking? But the Buddha didn't tell us to practice noble silence. I mean, we do that on a retreat, but you don't find that in the Vinaya. What you find is right speech. And that's different. Speech which is in concord, speech which is according to Dhamma, speech which is truthful, speech which is uplifting. Right? So it's about right speech. On a retreat, we try to practice, right, noble silence, but usually we fail. And then we feel guilty. And then we try again. Can you elaborate? It all belongs. So this is the way Luangpor Viradhammo teaches. He says, it's like this, and it all belongs. Now, I know some Westerners, they don't like that phrase, it all belongs, because it sounds like you approve of everything. But it's not approval, it's just accepting into your mind the totality of human experience. Because of the tendency to be idealistic. Luangpor Viradhammo speaks, if you listen to his Dhamma talks, he talks a lot about idealism and the attachment to idealism. So idealism, how would you say that in Thai? Idealism. Anyone? Net, Yom Net, you're a goodie. Udom. Okay, everyone got that? So idealism is a concept of perfection that each of us holds about what we should be. What is a good monk? What is a good mom? What is a good citizen? Or whatever. And then the reality is never that. You know, I can read the biography of Luangpor Man, the biography of Ajahn Chah, biography of Venerable Sariputta, Venerable Moggallana, and feel totally inadequate. If I think that I have to be like whoever. And we have, we have an aspiration to be good people, but that's different than attachment to ideals. So I have role models. I have the role models of my teachers, which are good things, of the saintly people that I read about, which are good things. But then I have my own reality. I have, the neuroses that I've inherited for some reason. I have the grumpiness that comes up when I have the flu. I have the silliness. I get more and more silly as I get older. My jokes become more corny. It's embarrassing. and what are you going to do? And well, I shouldn't crack any jokes. I'm a senior monk, right? Oh God. So there's some kind of ideal, and then there's a reality that when I have the flu, I'm sometimes not such a nice guy, and that's more real. And so that when it all belongs, it's really, again, what we mean by metta, in a sense of that you include all the ugly parts of your consciousness, all the bits that you're really embarrassed about and hope no one sees, all those thoughts that if someone saw them, you'd feel mortified. All the whole business, it all belongs. That doesn't mean you express it or that you agree with it. So then if you took it on a larger plane, injustice belongs. Not that I approve of injustice. Cruelty belongs. Not that I approve of cruelty, because cruelty does exist. So then I do my utmost not to live not to allow cruelty to take place, right? Or not to allow injustice to take place in the monastery. I do everything I can, but it's like that the world is has cruelty. So that what Luangpor is, I think, asking us to consider is like you accept everything with mindfulness, and then you act for the good. So whether it's within my own heart or within society, because I could just like all day think about what's unfair. I could just all day just think this is unfair, this is unfair, this is unfair, this is unfair. I would be miserable, even though I would be right, right? And so I can see unfairness belongs. It's a part of the human condition, but I'm going to try to be fair, and I'm going to try to address unfairness in my life. So it's a way of getting beyond idealism. So look in your own minds at the difference between the reality of your emotional inner social life and the ideal. So like if someone in your circle of friends is racist or misogynist or, kind of really a nasty character, you don't like the person, but that's a part of reality. This part is. You can, like, you know what misogynism is? Someone who hates women, right? That in English, misogynist. So someone's a misogynist, is making, horrible jokes about women or something like that. You accept it, but you say, hey, don't do that. You can do that, right? You can say that. Don't do that. That's not nice. But you're coming from acceptance. Okay, this is creepy. I don't like this. It feels really nasty. But you accept that. Okay, you feel that. But then you can do something. You can speak to it, right? So as Buddhists, we're not like metta doesn't mean you don't say something. You can be assertive. You can be powerful. But you first of all have to accept the situation so that you're not just reacting through anger all the time. And I know this, like one person in our group really doesn't like that because it sounds like you're approving of something. So in your own consideration, can you see when I say metta and sati, say awareness and acceptance, or metta, allowing, can be one thing in the sense of if I'm going to really be aware of something, I have to accept it first. If I'm going to be aware of self-consciousness, I have to have metta for the self-consciousness. I have to accept it. If I'm going to be aware of another person who is obnoxious and difficult, somehow, even though I don't like them, I have to accept, oh, this person affects me this way before I can speak to them. So that's what it's pointing to. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does. Okay, I think we can leave it there.